Hello everybody, welcome here to your Razer Academy video where you get to learn Dota with myself, Toby1. That's right, we get to learn together, hand in hand, waltzing down the River Nile. I don't really know if you will have actually been to Egypt. Have you been to Egypt? Maybe, I haven't. I'd like to be there one day, the day a Dota land is hosted there. That could be entertaining. In the meantime, let's actually have a look at what we're supposed to be doing this week. Now, we're doing this a little bit faster than last time. Everyone's going to be going, oh my god, there's just too much Dota to learn right now. We always think that anyway. But we are back here again for another week of Learn Dota. Normally I go, let's have question time to start with, but really we've done it so fast I haven't even been time for questions to happen. But I do have one question which was left over from actually a previous Razer Academy video for the Learn Dota section. So I kind of want to expand on this one. He's going to be my inspiration for this Learn Dota so we can discuss the different things about what he wants to ask. I should just say the question before we go on. So the question is, Toby, usually I have a good early game, but my team will suck in the mid game because we don't know what time to push towers. Could you say something about timing and how to push a tower safely? That comes from Peaching993. So, ma'am, I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to be talking about all the timings for the world of Dota when you play a game, and this will stretch from early to mid to late game, what these really mean, and what heroes you need to try and use during those periods to make the most effective game style. Now, in the last video we did talk about meta game style and how you would draft your lineup to the current trend so you can either counter or it can work to your kind of set strat, so you go with your focus of how you want to win the game. Now, what I want to talk to you about is, let's just break it up into three different bits. Early game, mid game, late game. What is important early game, what is important mid game, what's important late game. So early game, first focus. Now, early game, you will not win a game in early game. You should never really have a GG before the 20-minute mark, unless you go a 5 intel rush and everyone's got pushing heroes and you just basically suicide yourself for towers and then call GG because it didn't work. Most teams would be able to work that out and go, hey, we got a half counter push, we've got this thing called a glyph of fortification, that'll actually hold off them. Yeah, it works. So really, at the end of the day, you're not going to win at the 20-minute mark. But what happens in that 0 to 20, which is what I class as the early game, is when you gain the advantage to win the game in mid-game. Mid-game or late game is when you plan to win an entire game of Dota. So in that 20 to 40-minute mark, or that 40 to 60-minute mark. If you go past the 60-minute mark, no one ever plans to win then, mainly because 60-minute mark would generally be the longest kind of like timing a plan can go to. Once you hit that 60-minute mark, you've capped all your items, you've done all that kind of stuff. The early game, the 0 to 20-minute mark, is when you've got to get your heroes the right items they need to push at the 20-minute mark. And this is what we talked about also last week with pushing strats for how you want to set it up. So early game heroes, let's jump ourselves into my little scene inside the game. Now, you're going to be looking at inside the game. Now, the reason why I want to use this is because of this window here. This is available inside the Dota client. And all you got to do is just hit this little Learn tab up the top corner. And by clicking that one, you get to look at all these different heroes. Now, you can already see Valve, they're trying to sort them out. So you can go the all heroes, carries, the escapes, the durables, initiators, disablers, jungles, blah, 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 blah. Any hero in Dota can be played in any way. These would just be the normal way of trying to describe a hero. So what I want to look at is what they class as support heroes. Now, this can be anything. This really can be anything. In the early game, your support heroes are your key heroes. Without these guys, you do not have an early game. Mid-game heroes as well as late-game heroes, they require utility heroes. So early game heroes are utility heroes, guys who can, at level 1, have an ability which can control action in a lane. Be it top, mid, bot, doesn't matter. Jungle, doesn't matter. These are the guys who control that kind of stuff. So with these guys, you win your early game. So you want to use heroes like Earthshaker, where that fissure, you can block off lanes, and that means at that point you can go GG because, well, not GG, you can say GG did that lane because an Earthshaker controls the lane so much that it's almost impossible to stand on it. unless you've got a jump mechanism that lets you get over walls, is very, very difficult to try and lane against an Earthshaker. It's the reason why it's just so popular these days. You can have a hero like Sven. This, of course, we're going through the strength supports at this point. Sven, AoE Blast, so a nice little setup stun. Storm Bolt, so it's a targeted stun as well. One of the very few AoE stuns which are set stuns. So you click it on a hero, and it'll fly towards that hero. That is the power of Sven. So there's his Storm Hammer, I should say, not Storm Bolt. Storm Bolt was the Warcraft 3 name for it. Later on, he can give it a little bit of extra support as well, but he's more of that kind of guy that he's not really used in a lot of lineups because no one really sees power for him in that mid part of the game, unless he's the one they're putting the farm on, and there's generally someone else that can take the role of him instead, and they just use him for that support, like stun, and his other thing, which is the war cry. So you let off the war cry, people around you, bonus armor, freaking fantastic, bonus movement speed, which lets you chase, and the Razer 700 standard. So very, very powerful ability to use if you are on the hunt, even if you're on the retreat. That's the reason why sometimes he can dabble as supports either way. He does have a counter push as well if you're going to level up the Greater Cleave, but more than likely you're going to put more levels into Warcry and Stormhammer than you would Greater Cleave, because unless you are really having to focus on counter pushing, your cleave ability just isn't as strong. So going through a couple of other ones, Omni Knight, the man who keeps everyone alive. Early in the game, he's actually not an early game hero, but he's coming up as a support player. The main reason why I say he's not an early game hero is because most of the time, Omni Knight is played as a carry. Or at least not really a carry, just a guy who farms up in the early game. So people like, well, range supports like Venomancer, Crystal Maiden will be supporting Omni Knight if they want to run him in that kind of role, because he's able to heal. That can come through with this wonderful ability called Purification. So instant heal, damage around as pure damage as well, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And then the Repel. You blocks most magical, from having an effect on the target. So basically, it's like having a BKB up your sleeve at all time. And then your degen aura, so the move and attack slow. That's also great for hunting down people. But he's one of those guys that just keeps scaling up and up and up. You can get Soul Ring, get Mech, and then you got yourself a mid-game hero. But we don't have to worry about him because he's... I know I kind of just went through him then because he's in the support role, but because we're talking about the early game, I kind of want to cover it anyway. Titan is another one of these guys where people look at him as a support hero because he basically is. He's a counter team fight player. A lot of people like to use him for his gush very early on. So his first ability, his Q ability, if you're from League of Legends and you like using that phrasing. So his Q ability, gush, it's really great to shut down anybody in a lane. You get negative armor and you get the 40% slow, which is a constant from level 1, which makes him great for those early initiations. And then you got the Anchor Smash as well. Every ability has a great use. So Anchor Smash, damage reduction of 40%. Hell frickin' yeah. Does a little bit of damage in an AoE, which is a 400 set radius. And the duration effect of the damage reduction is 40% as well. Great. How much cost is that? 7-second cooldown, 30 mana. Just spam the living crap out of that. And that's what's used, and this is kind of why Tide goes into multiple angles, because while a lot of people use him as his Ravage, and that's all he really is for, if you're going up against melee heroes or heroes like Broodmother, then it is fantastic to get a guy like this, because he can just stay on the lane. He's a very, very strong strength hero, and he can be a great kind of, word I'm currently searching for, just tank. Just a tanky, supporty kind of guy that turns into something more if he gets a good start. But that's all about what you're trying to focus on in the early game. We can go through a couple of other strength guys which weren't really appearing up. SK is one of them. Burrow Strike for him. He can go in the same kind of role where you can give him farm or not. But a lot of people do enjoy the SK because of the Burrow Strike. You've got to get a lot more levels up on the Burrow Strike, however, to make sure you can get the range, because as you increase your levels, you increase the range. And the stun duration stays exactly the same, and that's the main thing you do try and get him early on, because you use him for ganks, and you can combine him with heroes like Leshrac, so there's this whole support combination duel you can run with. So yeah, SK, always great, and always has a little bit of team fight a little bit later on. As far as other supports coming out, the strength heroes, you generally won't see them. The main reason why is, well, you don't need them. Strength heroes are mainly carry heroes, guys that need farm to tank up to get items and then carry through the game. Some people can play Skeleton King as a support, so, as opposed to SK. They're both called SK, one Sand King, one Skeleton King. And that's money for the Hellfire Blast, but it's a very... very old school way of doing it. It was, I think there was some change done to him, but the biggest problem with running SK as support is, sure, he's going to live. You try and focus him down, it's just a pain in the ass because he's going to respawn if he has the mana, and that's if he has the mana. At the first level, he can fire out one Hellfire Blast, and it'll be 10 mana short of throwing out another one. So at the end of the day, he's always a little bit short of mana, and he needs that mana for his ultimate to function, and that's his reincarnation, which will let him come back to life again. It's like having an Aegis Immortal built into you. Cooldown's pretty long at level 1, and the mana cost is basically half his mana pool, which is never a great thing when you hit level 6. Support heroes in agility now. We can jump down to these guys. As I said, most heroes can play multiple roles during for intelligence and well, actually for strength and agility. These heroes can play multiple roles. Earthshake is the only one that doesn't really do it, and that's because, well, he's got support spells. He's not really a huge damage dealer. He can do it, and there's only one time in all of history of Dota 2 that I remember it, and it was a game played by Dendi, and he was able to do that, and he ended up getting some stupid farm. Like it was a Daedalus as well as BKB, and some stupid build, which he ended up going for with a Blink Dagger. And it was a lot of damage. And when he crit, he killed someone instantly because the totem like extra damage. I don't know if people actually know about this thing, but the enchant totem, bonus 300% damage, and you crit with a Daedalus, it destroys anybody in one hit. The problem is Earthshaker never gets that much farm, unless he's Dendi, at which point then he does. Agility heroes, let's go through those guys. And we'll go through the first one, which is Vengeful Spirit. So he's the first really support hero. People have been playing him as a damage dealing, or her I should say, as a damage dealer. It's always a little bit more difficult trying to play a VS as a damage dealer. The main reason why is you can't get enough support items in order to basically play her as a damage dealer. You need to go up with Trez, you need a Manta Style, you need a whole bunch of extra items for very little. I guess still decent damage. And positional-wise, you get yourself a good stun, you got a nice little Vengeance Aura, so you've got a bonus, stack your own bonus damage up, 36% for that one. Hell yeah, that's actually okay. But the problem you then have is, well, who is my support? Like, I deal all my stuns, I then have to swap myself in with my ultimate to get myself in position, but I get myself out of position then. I get myself in a lot of danger. It's trouble when you jump yourself in as a Vengeful Spirit. And she doesn't really function as that, but if you do have good supports and you got good timing as far as your team goes, then it can function as so. But most of the time, VS, great support hero, easy targeted stun, and negative armor to come from the Wave of Terror. So, and that can also be used for scouting. So it's a nice little way to run a support hero. Going through the rest of them, none in that little pool. Over to our agility boys. Venomancer, hello Veno. Venomancer is our guy who is always a great support. He is the thorn in everybody's side. And it's mainly because of this thing in the Plague Wars, to get those guys up to level 4 as fast as you possibly can, and no one can push against you when you've got your wards set up. And it's going to force teams to rotate to a different lane to try and find another avenue. If a Venomancer has 7 wards set up there waiting for you, yeah, there's very, very little chance you're going to get through. He's also got the Venomous Gale, which gives him a good initiation. It's very, very similar to the Tide Gush early on, and mainly because I'm talking about the slow. It's a little bit more than the Tide slow. That's 50% for the Venomous Gale, so 40% for the Tide. Oh, where are you, Tide? My brain is not finding him. There he is, green guy with watermelon head. So, yeah, 40% to 50%. Thought so. So yeah, and then he's got his ultimate as well. So it's the same as Tidehunter as far as initiation goes. Team fight options to get a good Venomous Gale, a good Poison Nova off is awesome during a team fight. Just to have that much damage over a large amount of radius, it just ticks everybody down, and it gives you a big advantage during a fight. But he's mainly done for a good harassment guy too, because with every right click, if you've got 1 level in Poison Sting, that's an easy slow, easy damage as well, and the slow lasts the same duration from level 1. So a nice way of running him. And he'll be our last support hero as far as agility goes. That's basically it. There's no other support heroes in there that you'd normally run. So if you are wanting to take a support hero, do that. I would run through every intelligence hero which is support, but we would be here all day. It's just the strength and agility ones I want to just point out for you a little bit. But if you do want to grab a support hero from intelligence, you'll be looking at Crystal Maiden. You'll be looking at Lina is a support hero. Shadow Shaman can be run as such, but better as a solo mid. Jakiro is definitely a support hero. Enchantress is part of the whole wooding kind of team. So you've got Enchantress, Prophet, Chen, They're all part of the junglers. Darkseer can also be a jungler as well. These are heroes who can survive in the jungle without having to come back out again. They've got ways to do it. Support heroes, Ogre Magi can kind of go multiple ways with Ogre Magi. I always love him being as a support because he's always just an easy multicasting stunner guy, but you've got to make sure you get levels up on him. Level 16 as early as you possibly can. There's just that Fire Blast combined with the multicast. It just destroys. Absolutely destroys. Bane Elemental, another one of these guards can play support carry. Lich is definitely support. That always has that ultimate for the team fights, the Chain Frost. A Lion, he can be done multiple ways. He's more of an initiator as well as a support hero. He can do multiple things because his abilities are utility, but his abilities are also a little bit of burst damage. So you got hexes, you got stuns, you got burst damage, and you got mana drain on top of that one. So there's a lot to add to all of this. And because of that, it's basically just a huge amount of strength to come from one hero. We shot to bounce support, heal, Enigma, another one of those jungler kind of heroes, Warlock support. You got Necrolite Co-op and Death Prophet in there, but they're more along the lines of carry. Pugna can be, he's more of a pusher kind of support. So as it says in his little role description, he's also a nuker. Leshrac, we talked about him multiple times over the last couple of videos, and he's just that dynamic guy who support and push. You got stuns, you got pushing power, you got burst damage, you got counter push. There's a lot to come out from him. Ancient Apparition, he is a good support hero, but sometimes can be run solo mid. Main reason for that is he wants to get that Ice Blast up as very early as possible. Having that level 6 on him gives so much global control and global ganking possibilities that you just don't want to turn it down. And the final support hero is Shadow Demon. So Shadow Demon is a support hero that doesn't scale. It's a phrase which you might hear come out from some people saying, does this hero scale? Does he hit a cap point where he's just not as strong? And the main reason he doesn't stop is, one, disruption. Always a great ability. Pull someone out and create replicates of it. And then he can take other people who get bigger, disrupt them up, and then steal them. Great counter to an anti-mage. If you see a guy in a pub game going up against you, and he picks an anti-mage, all you gotta do is just pick the Shadow Demon. Disrupt him up every single time he tries to engage, and then he's gonna face up against himself. Shadow Poison also, great way to give vision. Similar to the Howl of Terror as far as vision goes, you pop it off in one direction, you latch it, and all of a sudden you can actually see the opposition. Great, and it gives you a little tick-off damage as well, which you can pop with the Shadow Poison release. Soul Catcher is the major reason why this guy does not cap. Bonus damage of 50%. This is used in that combination of Leshrac, Invoker, and Shadow Demon. Shadow Demon starts off with his disruption. Leshrac follows up with his stun after the Soul Catcher is done, because while someone is inside the disruption, you can still cast these abilities on them, like Soul Catcher. So the second he comes back out again, boom, you can hit him again, and there's going to be bonus damage on the back of that thing. So you use that kind of ability, and then the last one, which is the Demonic Purge, which is always great when it comes to basically just destroying off any hero. It's fantastic. But it's mainly those two abilities, the Soul Catcher and Disruption, which just makes him such a perfect support hero in the early game. Now, we've gone through early game. Let's have a look at mid game for people. Now, I know a lot of people will be going out there, wow, that was a really long time going through support heroes. But if you want to know what heroes to play in that early game, if you want to try and control it, you need a couple of those guys to work together with these mid game or late game heroes. And this is going to be that point when you go, well, those support heroes we just ran through, what can they actually do and when can they do it? Talking about Shadow Demon, his scaling going into late game, when does he become that powerhouse that everyone goes, oh my god, how do we deal with this kind of thing? The easiest way to look at the mid game and your mid game heroes is to try and match up. So you look at your lane matchups. So I said Leshrac and Shadow Demon. Great combo lane, you can run as a dual lane, and Leshrac can make the most of the farm and becomes a mid game hero. Because the early farm they get, it means arcane boots, it means mana for everybody, but a BKB very early on makes Leshrac almost unkillable when it comes to team fights. And it's during that 20 to 40 minute part that he needs to be unkillable to be able to run straight to the middle of the fights and go, you know what? I got this, guys, because I got a BKB. What are they going to do to stop me? So you've got to try and match up your support heroes with your mid-game heroes. Let's jump ourselves back to that little screen which we've got. So we can talk about our mid-game heroes. Now, this is not going to help us at this point. Lane support, pusher, initiator, don't care about it at this point. What you want to know about is, what do I want to work with my support heroes. A lot of games of Dota come down to laning. It's the reason why pub games don't always work properly, because people select the heroes they want to play because they're just in the mood to play that type of hero. It doesn't mean he functions with all the other heroes on the map. There's that wonderful word called synergy. You've got to find two heroes that really couple together with their different abilities. Like, it's not going to be great to grab a Venomancer, and then you want to grab someone like Night Stalker, or actually that actually works kind of nicely because it's a huge ass amount of slow. But you don't want to be stacking multiple abilities which do the same thing. So if they don't stack, pain in the ass. But like, I was going to use Venomancer and Night Stalker as an example, but it actually turns around the other way. Because if Venomancer Gale hits and Night Stalker drops the Void, fantastic, you got yourself one hell of a slowed person. Can't do anything about it. That hero will be walking on the spot. Venomous Gale slow, and then the Night Stalker, his Void, and attack slow, move slow, 50%. 50% slow from that one, and you've got a 50% slow out from Venomancer. You don't walk anywhere, basically, with that. Then you have a hero like Mirana, who is able to leap herself away to safety. Here she is. So she's got that leap, gets bonus movement speed. It's very, very minute in comparison to the amount of slow she's got, but it lets her go from one point to the other. And then you've got her slow, but she's not here, she's over there. So what do you do then? You're still over here, and you're going to attack her over there. So how do you try and deal with that? It's not the lane you need to go against her. And that's why you got to look at something like a Vengeful Spirit, a set stunner, or something like that. Someone that can set up with the initial stun and then follow through, or you have something even better. You bait with the initial slow and then have an ES Fissure drop on. So you got to bait out the leap out of her. But all of this is like, how do you combine your different heroes together to work in the lane to help you win the mid game? Sometimes your early game can be so amazing you can win in the mid game, and you'll have heroes like the Lone Druid, and with his Spirit Bear he can push down towers so damn easily, but it's all about giving him the space to do so. And then you'll need heroes like Crystal Maiden and Earthshaker, those big stunners very early on that are able to try and deal with the amount of push or the amount of damage that can be done from the opposition while still giving your farmer, your Lone Druid, space to farm. All right, I think I've gotten a little bit off track with a little bit of this, but let's just look at mid-game as a simple scenario. Let's stop looking at hero combinations, because that kind of stuff is something which you can never really explain in a video that's going to be this short. What you need to do for hero combinations is just always talk with your teammates and try and work out what works for you guys. What you need to find when you assemble your entire team is, do I want to take the game and win the game at 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50? They should be your marks for when you want to say, this lineup will win the game by then. So if you want to win the game early on, you look towards your mid-game heroes. So you want to have the supports we mentioned beforehand, and you want to look towards mid-game heroes that get a lot of strength from the early game starts. And we're talking Tiny, as well as Slider. They're good momentum-based heroes. Night Stalker can also be added to that field. So they're our melee strength heroes that just dominate that time period. Same with Punch. Punch is always great for making openings very early on. Lycan can also do the same, but most people will ban out Lycan because he's more of a jungle kind of mid-game overpower kind of guy. If you want to look at the agility heroes for your mid-game, you want to find those people who have a lot of right-click damage early on. And that is not heroes like Anti-Mage. They don't have that mid-game power. They're a late-game hero. So you want to look down the lines of Mirana. Clinkz is also very powerful early on, but he's a bit more of a babysitter kind of one. He's like the Lone Druid, who requires a little bit of extra farm early on to get that item which works for him. So Lone Druid, key item being Radiance for Clinkz. Key item is generally an Orchid of the Malevolence. Gives you a large amount of damage early on and also gives you that silence. Lone Druid can also be added into the same pool as Phantom Lancer. Phantom Lancer, with his Radiance, is a great mid-game pushing kind of hero, but it's more of a presence of all these illusions and also his ability to escape very, very easily. So he's a nice one for that one. Ursa's a mid-game hero as well. He's got a lot of burst damage that comes out mid-game and needs very, very few items to do that. It's just this amazing power of, well, one, overpower, but two, it's the Fury Swipe. So it's the damage per attack, which just keeps stacking and stacking and stacking, which makes him able to bring down heroes very, very quickly, no matter how strong they are. It's why teams like NextKZ prefer to use this kind of guy, because he just gives just so much more burst damage out of nowhere. Mid-game hero as well, we can look towards the lines of, I kind of make Shadow Fiend a mid-game. Shadow Fiend for me is a mid-game kind of guy. He does so much burst damage early on. Even during that first 0 to 20 minute mark, he hits around that 10-minute mark after he's got like level 8, the Razer up at full. We got 3 levels of Necromastery, he might have a level in Ultimate, something like this. And he's got that extra damage. He'll have the soul stored up, and he's a good burst damager early on. But he really comes into his own once he hits that 20-minute mark, and he's the one that can win games for you during that period. Who else we got? Razer. He is a mid-game hero, but can also get to the point where he is tanky enough to kind of carry into that late game. But so can a lot of mid-game heroes can do that kind of thing. But yeah, most of the time though, Razer, not really selected unless you're looking for a big tanky kind of guy. But if you wanted to go for like a pushing lineup and to push safely, like Peaching was asking us before, Razer, he's okay, but he's more of a counter-offensive kind of guy. He'll be that guy on the defense, wait for you to come on him, and then he'll start sucking at your damage and destroy you. Clink's side lane pusher, heavy in the mid-game. Insanely heavy in the mid-game. If you do not win the mid-game, it's basically all over with Broodmother. She's a side lane pusher, and her abilities start to cap once you hit that 40, maybe 45-minute mark. Then she's basically lost out, unless you've got the most amazing start ever, and if that's the case, you've already taken a rank to the opposition. Broodmother, risky pick to go with, but if you can pull off it, if you can get a good team to function, and we're talking like a 4-man ganking squad with the Broodmother pushing on a side lane, then you can take out Rax, then Broodmother pick works for you. But if you're thinking any part of, we can't get the farm in time and we can't beat them by the 40-minute mark, don't go a Broodmother. Weaver, actually really good early game damage and also a great laner. Later on in the game, is very, very dependent on Weaver. Weaver's kind of like that Mirana kind of pickup. If you get really good farm, you are fantastic. Very little people can kill you, great damage to come out from you, and you got a great escape mechanism. So it works fantastically to have a Weaver, good mid-game hero to go with, but you got to give her a good start. Be it solo lane, if you have a confident person to play the Weaver. If you don't, that's not really going to function well for you. But if you want to babysit them a little bit more, and that's like if you're playing Dire top lane, solo, and just have one hero supporting to ensure that Weaver can get a good start, or maybe just give a couple of ganks towards that top lane so the levels are there and the advantage is there, then Weaver will come out on top and you've got yourself a good mid-game push. Intelligence heroes, we don't really need to look at the mid-game heroes for that. Maybe a couple of heroes to point out would be Shadow Shaman, just because he's got great power when it comes to the mid-game. Tinker is the same. They're both good global control and pushing powers, and they also require very good farm early on. Tinker mainly has BTs. Storm Spirit, great initiation when it comes to anything mid-game. He is the guy that will roll your entire team if he even has a half good start. It should be impossible. It's not always impossible, but it should be impossible to kill a Storm Spirit once he gets level 6 in the very early stages of the game. So during that period from maybe 6-7 minutes onwards to 20-minute mark, Storm Spirit should be the one dominating that part of the game, because he can just jump in, jump out all the time. He's only limited by his mana pool. So that's the downside for him, but it's also the upside, because the higher he gets mid-game with more items, that means the higher his mana pool, the more maneuverability he has, and the more aggressive he can be on a lot of people. Jumping over to the last side of the intelligence heroes, we can go with Queen of Pain. One of the most popular pickups in the current world of Dota 2, mainly because she's great in the early game. Very, very similar to Storm as far as the pressure goes, and that's mainly because this first ability, which a lot of people are using a lot more now, which is the Shadow Strike, lets you get a lot of control over your lanes very early on. It's a tick over DPS, so people who have salves on lanes cannot pop it off, because when you're ticking DPS, so that's when you're taking damage per second, you can't use a salve, because when you take the damage, your salve then stops. So it's a great way of controlling a lane and forcing heroes back from your lane, which gives you the early level advantages. That's why Queen of Pain is such a great side lane solo, or mid lane control if you want to look at it that way. And not to mention she's got escape mechanisms, she's got a big ulti, which does a huge amount of damage if you get in the right line, and then the Scream of Pain, which is, another, again, burst damage for her. So she's a boom, hit, target, jump out, fantastic, we just won the mid game. Other people to help out with the mid-game is Crobulus, but that's also one of those heroes like Mirana, great in the mid-game, awesome to carry into the late game, just if they get a good start in that point, in the mid-game that is. Just that ultimate to push. take out so much with that one, but you need a couple of items during that mid-game so you can tank it up, and then you can become unstoppable in the later game. But it's just that it's one of these heroes which is great in the mid-game, but is heavily reliant on the support members to be there and ensure you've got the space to stand there with their ultimate. Invoker is a guy for any time of the game. Great for laning anywhere on the map because of that Sunstrike. You can just do anything anywhere. You'll notice too, like, the ability passes are completely empty because he's just complicated. I highly suggest watching last week's video if you want to know a little bit more about Invoker. OD is one of these guys which is mid-game, heavily orientated, great for early game laning as well. He is a steamroller, basically. If he gets a good momentum, nothing really can stop an OD. He can carry the late game, but he won't go to a late game if you've got a good OD. Okay, late game is our last one. I realize I'm already probably boring the living crap out of you because we have not looked inside the game. We're just going through heroes, but hey, you got to look at this kind of stuff at one point of your life when you try and search out Dota. Let's look at hard carries. So hard carries through the strength lineup. DK is actually one I'm going to put into that semi-hard carry, and the main reason why I'm putting him in that semi-hard carry is early game he does have great abilities to push back, and we're talking Soul Ring into level 4 Breathe Fire, which is this little sucker here. Great for counter pushing, has a stun up his sleeve as well, but what makes DK so big later on in the game is if he gets a huge amount of farm, you basically can't kill him. He's got that level 3 dragon of his with the Frost Dragon, splash damage and frost attack, so it's slowing everybody in a big radius while dealing a lot of damage. Hurts so badly. That's why I kind of like him. He's one of those heroes that you keep getting items up on him and he does become unkillable. But he is still one of those guys which would technically be classed as a mid-game, but I kind of like to throw him a little bit later into the game. It takes more time for him to get those items, so he's more of a late-game oriented hero. Doombringer, we'll put it along the same lines. I would point out Brewmaster right now for the mid-game heroes, but he's more of an initiator. Let's not talk about that kind of thing. We're late game. We'll focus on late game. We can do this. Doombringer, he is the farming central. Devour is the main reason he was brought back into the metagame for a short time. Mainly because he'll just devour something, get bonus gold, and he just gets a lot of extra money. It's very similar to the Alchemist as such. The downside with Alchemist is he has very low base armor, so not many people go with him because he's just so easy to kill in the early game. Whereas different with Doombringer, having that Scorched Earth, he can regenerate very easily. So because of that, he has a little bit more stability in the early game. It's the reason why Alchemist isn't picked and Doombringer is sometimes picked. And Doombringer with that ultimate of Doom always has something to add to a fight. Damage over time, as well as permanent silence for 13 seconds duration. Shut down a huge hero during that period of time. So that's Doombringer, and we got Nakes in there as well. He can also get pretty big, but he's in the same line as DK. Requires those items up, but he's also a good mid-game kind of guy once he has that armlet. Anti-Mage, a lot of people will know as one of the biggest, hardest carries. Main reason for him is he just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Items get bigger and bigger. There's his maneuverability and the ability to suck mana. If he gets a BKB and also an early Battle Fury, he can just farm it at an insane rate. There's very little... In fact, there is no hero that can keep up with Anti-Mage if he gets an early Battle Fury. There is no one on the map that can do it. Just because he can jump from creep camp to creep camp to creep camp so damn fast. It's impossible to stop. Other quick carries to go through. Morphling, another one of those big popular hard carries later on in the game because he's also a great counter to the Anti-Mage, able to replicate whoever is really strong. So we can take copies of heroes like DK when he's in Frost Dragon and turn that against people. So it's a big ability for him, but it's also because he's got 4 escape mechanisms, which make him very difficult to kill. And a hard carry who you cannot kill is exactly what a hard carry should be. Always on the map, always having a presence, always able to push out the lanes, and always able to deal a lot of damage too. That's the reason why we see a lot of Morphlings go for an Ethereal Blade very early on, what has been nicknamed a Shotgun Morph, because he can basically pop support heroes like that. Very easy. Very fast, very dangerous. Last two hard carries. Faceless Void and Spectre. Now I put these guys into that unkillable scenario. These guys, it's through Faceless Void's backtrack, 25% chance to dodge an attack. Doesn't matter what it is. You could dodge a Laguna Blade for all you know. Both physical and magical damage. Can evade it all. 25% for that one. Which, if your luck goes your way, you can almost take up an entire engagement, depending on your luck. And then you got the huge ultimate, which helps out your team. It's a very, very team fight-based thing. It's a lot of early burst damage early on. So that's one thing to look at from Faceless Void. But it's just because he can survive for so long, and he's got that escape mechanism or initiating mechanism, and he's such a strong kind of guy. You can bash someone into place, get a good Mask of Mana, Sing Sing style, and that kind of guy, and you'll just demolish everybody. Spectre, a little bit different. Spectre's one of those guys where he almost beckons you to attack him because he has this wonderful dispersion. So 22% reflected damage, and Spectre with a Vanguard, a Hood, a Heart, something like that, and then you got a Radiance Burn on top of that one. Very, very difficult to bring Spectre down. What makes him even more stronger, he's got a good chase mechanism through the Spectral Dagger, so that lets you go over the top of, well, environmental areas, so you can jump over trees, you can do all that kind of jazz, so easy to maneuver. But what makes Spectre one of the best hard carries at the end of the game is because you can push out any lane you want to, by yourself. No, you can use your dagger to escape. No, you've got dispersion, so unless there's a lot of people trying to gank you, it's not really gonna, you're not really gonna die. And if all 5 heroes are not there killing you, all 5 heroes from the opposition not there killing you, you pop your ultimate off, which is Haunt. That's reality, that is Haunt. Lets you jump, in fact, you'll create an illusion next to every single enemy hero on the map. You then use reality and jump to that hero. Now this can be used in multiple ways. This can be used to let you push out a lane, then the opposition decides to push in, and then you go Haunt. And you're everywhere during the team fight. You can jump to any position during the team fight if it's next to a hero. So you can always join a team fight from anywhere on the map. And that's what makes Spectre one of the best carries, because she can always be involved. And you can always push it out of lanes to keep that control. So that's the power of Spectre. Hard to bring down and easy to go. So I kind of have gone off a little bit off our original topic, and we kind of looked at like what heroes you would use for your early game, which is your support heroes, obviously utility heroes, your mid-game heroes, which you want to really focus on, and then your late-game heroes, which don't really function in the world of Dota these days because there's just too much easy push in the early and mid-game that the hard carries don't really work. You need to have 4 mid-game heroes or early mid-game heroes that will just stall it up until your hard carry gets that position where he farms. Either that or you find a sneaky little way to farm up your hard carry a lot faster. It's the reason why anti-mage still gets picked here and there, because they realize Battle Fury is the way to do that, but your other 4 heroes have to be that distraction, have to be that buffer for your hero. So even if you're like 15 kills behind in the first 20 minutes, if your anti-mage has that Battle Fury by 13, 14 minutes in, you'll actually be probably fine to get through the game, because he will farm at an insane rate, and as long as you can still control your jungle, you should be okay. You'll win the game. And that's what it's all about. Try and get your timing right. Do I want to win it in the mid-game? Who is going to carry me there? And how do I push into the main base? Tier 1, Tier 2s. Do I look for control over different parts of the map? When do I push in for the Tier 3s? Because that's always your biggest hurdle when you try and work out when you want to win a game. You've got to work out, what hero have I got? How much power do I have to push through? Can I survive a team fight? How fast, how long do I need to bring down a tower? Should I try and focus on killing the opposition? If you're 25 minutes into the game, you might have 20, maybe 25 seconds before the team gets back at full health, before you can push in. Who do you have that can push in fast? It's the reason why Bear likes to be preferred for those type of lineups. Leshrac as well, Shadow Shaman's Rast Awards, that kind of stuff. You just push in on towers so fast, and then the racks. And that's when you can win games. That's when you start to shift the momentum. But whatever you do when you choose your lineup, try and work out exactly when the point is you want to hit, and where you want to hit, and how you want to hit. Always another last thing, make sure you know what you're going up against. If you don't know what the opposition have got, you've got to pick up heroes which might work for you, and that's what's called a pocket strat. Is that strat which you know those 5 heroes function perfectly together. Fantastic combination, it's going to work a charm. But maybe the 5 heroes your opposition has counters you perfectly. So you've got to mix and match, and that's the whole thing of why drafts are so important. And even if you just watch a couple of VODs out there and don't watch the game itself, watch the draft and see how each of the captains try and draft each other out. They ban out one hero, which I think is going to work with their strat, with their lane combination, with their time to push, that critical moment in the game. Do they want to win mid-game? Well, we can work it out already, so let's ban out all these junglers because we know they want to use those guys to push in at a certain time. So let's take them out. So just basically watch the drafts, guys. I know a lot of people skip over it. I know there's guys over on the YouTube channel of the guys who watch my broadcast always put that little mark in saying draft starts here, game starts here. So people just skip to the game. It's like, oh, guys, you're missing out on a big portion of what sets up the entire world of Dota. But yeah, that should be it for this week, guys. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you did manage to learn something. If you want to learn something specific, as in you have a question, please put it in the comment section below, and I will check it all out. I read all of the comments. So yeah, if you've got a question, please leave it behind, and I will try and answer it in next week's Razer Academy video. But thank you very much to Razer, and thank you very much to you guys, the viewers, for tuning in today. This was Razer Academy Learn Dota. Laters, guys.